Hello and welcome back to Mark's NOTCAST, an irregular series about once a week where I, Mark, talks to his mobile phone, you, about records that I like, love or merely own. And I'm going through loads and loads of bands' discographies in a kind of linear, chronological fashion, talking about my thoughts and impressions of the bands and their work at that respective time and my life experiences, or not, as the case might be. And of course, talking about life experiences, one of the bands that may surprise you actually are human beings and not just robots, are one of Germany's premier exports, Kraftwerk, who I've seen a number of times and I've liked for 34 years. This is a series called a NOTCAST. It is not a podcast. And I'm on a very, very big number now. I think this is number 478. And today is Wednesday, the 14th of January, 2026. So if you're watching this, I am communicating to you from the past. And let me tell you, 2026 has taken some weird turns already, and hopefully it's going to take a few more, because there's things going on. Strange things are afoot at the Circle K, as they say in Clerks. Picking up the Kraftwerk story again. At this point, and I'm picking up the story probably around about 2009, just after Florian has retired, effectively sold his half share in Kraftwerk Limited to Ralf Hutter, hence the change of all the copyright details on the future releases, and gone off to retire as an eccentric, rich German dude. And recently a lot of his possessions were auctioned, and a lot of them got a lot of money, including tens of thousands of pounds for synthesizers that probably don't work and things like that. I did look at what was on there. I'm not a synth geek, and so I looked at it and went, well, that's very nice, and if I was a millionaire, I'm sure I'd buy something. One, I'm not a millionaire, so two, I didn't buy anything. And so we pick up the Kraftwerk story now with the new version of Kraftwerk, the version that generally exists to this day, the one perhaps somewhat flippantly called Ralfwerk, as it is. Ralf Hutter is the only member that has remained in the band since 1970. There was a period when Ralf wasn't in the band in 1970, between I think June and December 1970, and he came back Boxing Day 1970, and the band carried on with Ralf as the band's effective leader, which he has remained to this day. And so nowadays, if you see Kraftwerk, you're not seeing Kraftwerk, you're seeing a version of Kraftwerk with only one guy left. It's like seeing Roger Waters and going, yeah, I'm seeing Pink Floyd. You're not. And at the same point, you kind of are. Kraftwerk has become almost not even a band, it's become a business. And there is a very telling kind of interaction which is mentioned in this book, I Was a Robot, by Wolfgang Flür, the band's percussionist and drummer, between 1973 and 1987, where he describes meeting Ralf in about the year 2000, and all traces of Ralf the artist appear to have disappeared and instead was replaced by Ralf the businessman, who was talking about the commercial possibilities of Kraftwerk, of touring, making lots of money, and the music itself merely being a product as opposed to an expression of an artistic consideration or vision. And that artistic consideration and vision also kind of coincides with the fact that effectively Kraftwerk haven't released any new material in the past 22 years. And in fact, it's 40 years ago this year that the band released their final studio album of all original material, with Carl Wolfgang from Florian in the band, called Electric Cafe, never techno pop. And since then, the band have issued one album of mostly new studio material, Tour de France, in 2003, and one compilation album of re-recordings, 1991's The Mix. So this book tells a story. It also tells quite a lot of other stories. It's worth reading. But effectively, 2010, Kraftwerk ceased to exist as a creative entity. Like a lot of bands, instead of creating new material and working on new material, the band effectively became a way of refining an existing commercial prospect. Some bands, they record new albums, but they're just the same as all the other albums. And I'm thinking particularly of you, the Antipodean rock gods AC/DC, who it appears hit their groove from the second single and just kept going without changing. Kraftwerk have done roughly the same, except they haven't bothered with the pretense of issuing new material. Instead, what we get is new things, more correctly, old things in new frames. With the issue of the Catalogue in 2009, a remastered, refurbished version of the band's body of work. We have the band's official kind of discography starting in 1974's Autobahn, running through to 2003's Tour de France, and handily obviating the first 4 studio records Ralf and Florian made together, being 1969, maybe 1970's Organisation, Kraftwerk 1, Kraftwerk 2, and 1973's Ralf and Florian, replacing them instead with Autobahn, the first song of theirs that was commercially successful, and therefore writing out of history all the embarrassing baby photos. And as you've seen from lots of bands, in the first few years, they're learning how to be. And that's something I'm going to be picking up in future episodes. But at a point in 1974, when they released Autobahn, they had made their template that this is who we're going to be. It was the Gerstam Kunstwerk, which for German means a complete work of art. So that's sound, vision, aesthetic, the whole thing together as a complete work of art. The first thing, apart from the 2009 catalogue, which I think has the copyright notice 2009 Ralf Hutter on it, as opposed to 2009 Ralf Hutter and Florian Schneider, was I think this book, which I showed you in a previous one, Robot Air. And this was, I picked up a copy of this at the Design Museum exhibition around techno and dance music in 2020. And let me just quickly check the copyright date that there is on this book. I don't think there is one, actually, come to think of it. Yeah, so 2013, Ralf Hutter and Kraftwerk, and then also there was this book, Kraftwerk 3D, and this effectively featured big pictures of the screen grabs that or the huge kind of rotating art that was presented to you if you attended a Kraftwerk concert. And let me quickly check. This was released 2011, so this was the first one. Kraftwerk 3D. The band presented their shows in 3D. You wore these 3D glasses on. Maybe I should do the show wearing this, but I don't think I will. And effectively kind of saw these huge, enormous projections, 60-foot high, featuring a very kind of simplistic, almost childlike naivety in terms of presenting the band's visual identity and ethos. I've described this as a kind of almost these visuals as being a simple hope in technology and the transformative power of technology to allow humans to move beyond the mere physicality of meat space and move into a higher state of mind, where effectively the melding between man, nature and technology had pulled together. 3D was a hardback book sold at shows in 2011, 12, 13 and onwards until they ran out of stock, allowing you to experience at least the sight of the live show that the band had put together. And in 2013, it was followed up by this book, Robot Air, which was also sold, I think the first time it was sold was at the Tate Modern in February 2013, which again features lots of photographs of robots doing exciting things like answering the telephone, standing pensively, and generally looking a tad moody. And then, of course, there was no actual representation of Kraftwerk as human beings in the printed form there at all. I showed you these previously. These are probably out of print now and probably expensive to get, but since I'm not selling them, you'll have to find some other way to get them. Luckily, the internet is absolutely full of pictures of Kraftwerk. I'm sure that you can find them. Starting in 2012, the band launched their live retrospective series, where they presented each one of the official 8 Canon albums from Autobahn through to Tour de France live and in full, not in sequence but in full, in concert. And then after playing the album, they followed that up with a series of extra songs that complemented it, effectively changing the set list around. Some bands never change their set list. You think about Depeche Mode on the World Violation tour. They changed 2 songs a night, and those were the ones that were played by Martin Gore acoustically. Think about Roger Waters. He didn't change any songs on his tour in 2006 to 2008. apart from I think the first show, every show had exactly the same set list running in exactly the same order for over 2 years. And as somebody who saw the show in 2007 and 2008, it's pretty boring, to be honest. Let alone if you're actually in the band and you're playing 110 shows with exactly the same set list in exactly the same order. I'd find that tedious, but I don't know. Maybe if you're in Kraftwerk, it's just a job, and it's a really, really good one. You get to travel the world, you get to play good music, you get to wear cool outfits, and the band gets to make a whole bunch of money. Now that nobody's buying records anymore, there is very little money in the recorded product, unless you're doing like 20 different coloured vinyl versions of an album and pumping up your profits that way. Live shows and merchandise are where it's at, and effectively, much like Bono said in 1992, Kraftwerk became travelling t-shirt salesmen, and you can probably tell that by the number of Kraftwerk t-shirts I own. Is that when I see Kraftwerk, I buy a t-shirt because their t-shirts are cool. The fact is, I'm a billboard advertising a brand. I know that. That's no different from wearing Adidas trainers or trainers with a Nike swoosh on. It's a brand affiliation and identification. And what you're saying to people by wearing the t-shirt is, these are my people, this is my tribe, that's how I see the world. Of course, unless you're wearing a Cradle of Filth, Dead Girls Don't Say No t-shirt, at which point you need to rethink. You need to go home and rethink your life choices, and you don't want to sell anybody any death sticks. So in 2017, the band announced the release of their second box set, the 3D Catalogue. This enormous beastie here. This features every single one of the 8 Canon studio albums presented live in re-recorded, rearranged, remixed, rethought forms using the band's new digital studio. And this is one of my favourite box sets of all time. At the same point, it isn't a live album, even though the band played approximately 13 residencies of 8 shows and they recorded all of them. And in fact, those venues are listed on the back of this box set, starting at the Museum of Modern Art in New York in early 2012, playing Dusseldorf in January 2013, the Tate Modern in London, February 13, the Akasaka Blitz in Tokyo in 2013, I think the Opera House in Sydney, the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles. They also played the Berg Theatre in Vienna, which was in November 2014, the Louis Vuitton Foundation in Paris, which was November 2014, the National Gallery in Berlin, which I don't have written down on here, which was January 2016, the Paradiso in Amsterdam in January 2016 or 2015. That's an amazing venue, by the way, the Paradiso, converted church, it's gorgeous. The Concert Hall in Copenhagen, the Oslo Opera House, which they played in August, and the Guggenheim in Bilbao in October 2016. And I think the last time they played the Catalogue in full was in Antwerp in 2017. They also played Eindhoven in a fantastic venue called the Eviolon. And if you don't know the Eviolon, Google it. It looks like a UFO, and it is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. But as you can see from some of the video footage in this set, not amazing. So the Catalogue, the 3D Catalogue, was effectively the live album that went alongside those Catalogue shows between 2012 and 2017, although it was released in about May 2017, so the Antwerp shows were performed too late to be included in the set. This features a new reimagined, rethought, remixed, alternate version, effectively a modern day director's cut of all of the previous songs from the band's official body of work between 1974 and 2004, presented in one huge set. The catalogue is exquisitely packaged. It is beautifully presented. It sounds magnificent, and it was released in 3 primary formats. One here is the 9-disc vinyl set. I will talk you through that. Another one here is the 8 CD box set of the catalogue, the more affordable version, coming in at a mere 42 or so pounds. And finally, the big enchilada is the 3D catalogue Blu Ray box set. This presents 4 Blu-rays, 5 hours of Kraftwerk performances, mixed and presented in 5.1 surround sound, featuring 2 video options, one live performances including the band, and second one just merely the projections. So if you ever think, I love these re-recordings, I want to hear them in 5.1 with fantastic spiffing video, this is the one to go for. And I believe this set presents itself in 3D compatibility on 3D TVs and Blu-ray players. Not that there are many of those left these days, but it's also 2D compatible, so you can stick it into your 2D Blu-ray player, and it doesn't look at all like Avatar. It just looks like watching really, really small versions of the projections from the live shows. And given the 5.1 sound, you get all the benefits of the show without any of the disadvantages of having to spend time meeting, talking to, and avoiding actual live human beings, which, having met people, I'm not always a fan of them. I can understand the appeal of it in its entirety. So, with that in mind, let's go in to the audio portion of the box set. In Sydney in 2013, Ralf Hutter did one of his rare interviews, and he said, now that we have finished 1 to 8, we can concentrate on number 9. And at number 9, that was 13 years ago, he said that. There's still no sign of the 9th album, which is actually Kraftwerk's 13th album. There's no sign of it yet. The band have announced some shows for this summer, playing prestigious venues across the UK as part of their multimedia tour. No idea if they're backing that up with a new release or not. Absolutely none whatsoever. I wouldn't be surprised if they play new material at those shows. They've been playing a track called Tango, which was part of the live shows in 1997 and 1998, which they then dropped. And they've been playing that live. I haven't seen that yet. I'm really looking forward to that. They didn't play it in Milton Keynes last year, which is a shame. But maybe there's a new album coming out and the tour is to support that. And if it isn't, frankly, we're still going to get about 2 hours of fantastic music played by businessmen in suits. So, having said that it finished on 1 to 8 and now concentrating on 9, even though there's no evidence that Kraftwerk have actually done any work on album number 9, with the 3D catalogue is both a live album and not. There's a fascinating interview with Fritz Hilpert, who is one of the band's audio engineers, did play with the live band until 2022, where he said this should be considered a studio-only album, but using original and live tracks to preserve the magic of the live performance and the highest sound quality. It is effectively pure audio recording. It's not a recording of the sound of the music in the venues with the audience. It's a recording of the signal that's coming out from the synthesizers and the microphones. There is no crowd noise whatsoever on 3D, the catalogue. In fact, the only time you can tell it is live when you have the unavoidable acoustic echo of the room in which the live vocals are being performed. It is effectively a dry, unmiked soundboard recording of the shows, but presented, represented, reprocessed in the studio by the bands. And Fritz says it should be considered as a studio-only album. So we have 4.5 hours of studio re-recordings of Kraftwerk made between 2012 and 2016 in this box set. And this is an absolutely essential part of the Kraftwerk body of work. It's kind of like, I hate to use the word special editions, because then that makes you think that somehow a robotic Greedo shot first. These are effectively new versions of old stories for us. It won the Grammy for the Best Dance and Electronic Album of 2017. It can be regarded as the second official live album. It can also be regarded as a studio box set. And it does feature some room mics, by the way. So in the venues, capturing the ambient sound of the room, which was then direct board feeds from soft synths and then mixed together. So the reactions of the audience in the hall are in the mix. They're very quiet. But there is no crowd noise. And for these shows, and I saw the catalogue at the Tate Modern on the 13th of February 2013, and I think I have to talk about that show at some point. It was an incredible show. The band at the Tate, well, firstly, ticket sales for the Tate were a shit show, in so much as their band had about they were selling about just over 1,000 tickets a night. They were playing in the main turbine hall of the Tate Modern, a power station on the South Bank in the centre of London. It was the first live shows that happened at the Tate. It was a way for Kraftwerk to represent themselves, not as a band, but as a living work of art. And instead of being a concert, we were actually experiencing an art exhibition performed live by the artists in front of us. It was a very interesting staging of it. They chose particular kind of museums, as I've said, the Guggenheim, for example, the Tate, the Museum of Modern Art, the Sydney Opera House, presenting Kraftwerk as effectively modern classical artists of renowned stature, as opposed to just a band. An interesting move, and one that tapped into the snob part of some of the parts of the fan base, but also one that took away the concept of you're seeing one of the finest techno bands of all time. It's more music to be thought about and felt than music to be danced to and to be experienced, especially as the audience gets older and older. The other part about it is when they started presenting the shows, they tried to install quad sound at the shows, and it didn't always work. So at the Tate, which, by the way, they switched off online sales at the Tate because the sales were so unsuccessful and it crashed it, and only sold the tickets in person on the day. I went into the venue because I worked around the corner from the venue the day the tickets went on sale, and I queued to find out that all of the shows had sold out about 30 people ahead of me. Instead, I did get to see the show at the Tate because they had a limited number of production releases that they were selling on the door for £60, cash only, not cards. And I spent quite a few hours queuing outside the Tate to make sure I was one of the people that got into the venue. And one of the other people that was in the queue, although I didn't know it at the time, was John Marsh, of one of my very favourite bands, The Beloved, who, although I've probably seen and spoken to him, I have no memory of whatsoever. At all, because the idea that people, when they start making records, they have lives, right? My brain just went, no, it doesn't happen. No, absolutely not. No chance whatsoever. Which I then, frankly, overturned by bumping into Matt Johnson twice in short succession, once at London Bridge Station and once coming out of a pub a few months ago. Whole different conversation there. I also bumped into Robbie Maddox from the Stone Roses, coming outside London Bridge Station about 10 years ago, and the idea of going, oh, that's it, and he's just carried on walking. I'm like, fine, yeah, you know. The idea that people that in bands have lives, I mean, God, how dare they? Shocker. Really, really is. Although, as we all know, Kraftwerk aren't alive. They're really just animated robots. And talking of robots, I'm now drinking robot fuel out of R2D2. The Tate was a phenomenal show, by the way, having seen it. They played Electric Cafe, not techno pop, Electric Cafe in full and in order for only the second time in their history, I think, or third time. And that meant that, you know, I was seeing Kraftwerk perform the Telephone Call, Sex Object, Electric Cafe, and Boing Boom Shack for only the third time in there. And they'd never toured that album, so for me that was the tour to go to. I know they didn't really tour Man Machine, but they toured Trans Europe Express before it came out, Radioactivity both before and after it came out, Autobahn all the time. Computer World had a huge chunk of Man Machine tracks in it. They'd never toured for Electric Cafe. That was the show that I wanted to get to. It was also the show which had the lowest demand, so it was the show that I got to see. And one of the shows, in fact, I know for a fact that I was present at the recording of the version of Music Non-Stop on here, is because it was the only show that the band played where they didn't end the show with Electric Cafe's Music Non-Stop. That show at the Tate was where they opened the show with Boing Boom Shack for I think the only time in their career, and they walked off. They didn't walk off stage, unlike every other show where the song ends and they walk off stage one by one. This show at the Tate, where they played Electric Cafe, was the only show where they opened with Boing Boom Shack, and all four members of the band stayed on stage for that song. That is the version of the song that is shown on screen during the Blu Rays. It is the version of the song that is on this live performance here. So, with that in mind, I've been to, of the Kraftwerk gigs I have been to, 3 of them have been on 2 of Kraftwerk's 2 live albums, and I'll take that. That's a really good strike rate. But nonetheless, there was a moment during the show they were playing, I think it's Space Lab, and there is a descending bass run that goes through Space Lab, and they had above the audience to the back a series of speakers facing down. Effectively, if I'm the crowd here, the speakers were facing down here towards us, and there was probably a ring of them that went like this, and the bass run, it started like this and it descended and then it met in the middle and then it came around again to the other side. And I definitely heard a voice in the crowd go, "Fuck me," because it was really quite impressive. It's the most beautiful bass I've ever heard. And yes, I've seen Left Field live. It was a fabulous experience. The show here, presented on this, it's as close as you can get to experiencing those shows these days. It is obviously no substitute for standing 10, 15 feet away from one of the greatest bands of all time, playing songs that changed the face of the future, songs that predicted the world that we're living in today, such as Computer World, songs that predicted electronic surveillance, the CIA, the KGB, emails, online dating in Sex Object, for example, all of those things. These are not songs which at the time felt like some kind of distant version of the future that wouldn't happen, and now they just feel like sly commentaries on a future that we sort of almost experienced about 20 years ago. And the production of 3D, the Catalogue, by the way, is absolutely glorious, and I'm going to explain kind of why. Is producing the surround sound version of the albums for the Blu Rays, by the way, here. Fritz took a very distinct approach, as he described it, is that he tried to detach yourself from the profile of presenting a real situation and presented a whole new horizon of sound. And what that meant was, when they were putting together the sound, they were thinking about a human standing at about 5 to 6 feet in a room with speakers around them like this, and then presenting the sound in such a way as that it reflects the concert experience and the altitude of the sound coming towards the person. Obviously this doesn't work for headphones, but it does work there was careful consideration around the height of a speaker that the listener would have listening to the set, and they used reverb and delay to set the bass and vocals at what approximately represented the audio qualities that you would have standing in a room with huge speakers around you. And it was a really careful, thoughtful, considered, and absolutely glorious presentation. And I've spent 27 minutes. I've not even opened the box yet. So let's go into the box and see what there is, whilst we tour Kraftwerk, being effectively a museum to their own past brilliance. The vinyl edition of this now is quite expensive. I managed to pick it up in a warehouse Amazon deal for about £65, not long after it came out. And this version features all of the albums presented, so effectively taking the core colours from the original studio albums: Autobahn represented by white on blue, Radioactivity by yellow on black, Trans-Europe Express by black and white, because these are the colours which are the primary colours which are used on the current studio configurations with the revised artwork. Each one has a number on the back. So this is Autobahn, that's number 1 in the sequence. The cover is blue and white, and it presents just a number 1 on there, and it gives you just the song titles on there as well. This follows the original sequence of the original album. Side 1 is a 14-minute version of Autobahn. Side 2 is the remaining tracks from side 2 of the Autobahn LP, Comet Melody 1 and 2, Mitternacht, and Morgan Spazergang. And if you speak German, I know I have pronounced those incorrectly, and I apologise for my stupid English tongue not being able to do so. Radioactivity, again presented here in an abridged form, so all of the albums are smaller in so much as shorter in length, arranged for concert performance with the new material. Again, this presents the 12 tracks from Radioactivity, presented in the sequence that's on the original album, and these are again shorter than the originals, in so much as a live performance of a track just doesn't always have the same space and structure as a studio version of it. Trans Europe Express is the first time where we effectively see a change to the running order. So side one is Trans Europe Express, Metal on Metal and Abzug in full, which I think runs to about 14-15 minutes. Side two is Showroom Dummies, Franz Schubert, Europe Endless and the Hall of Mirrors, which means that the Europe Endless and the Hall of Mirrors are shunted from the beginning of the album towards the end, by the way. But it is, again, a gloriously rethought version of them. The song remains the same, yet somehow is better and tighter. The Man Machine here, taking the classic red and black from the Man Machine album, but again producing those graphics into just 4 oblique monoliths of faces, again has its sequence changed. So the robots and the Man Machine swap places. The album opens with Man Machine and it ends with robots, as opposed to starting with robots and ending with Man Machine. And again, these versions are gloriously interesting alternative interpretations, alternate mixes. They're not better, they're not worse, they're just different. Computer World, because yellow and black is used for radioactivity, Computer World takes its cue from the Computer World single, the 12-inch that came in a lime green cover, and this features again the yellow, the black and the green from that. This represents the album again. Home Computer is, well, It's More Fun to Compute, which ends the album, which is effectively a huge instrumental reprise of Home Computer, is turned into an extended version of Home Computer, and with It's More Fun to Compute actually at the start of the song as opposed to the end, and ends on Pocket Calculator and Dentaku, which is officially on an album, another release for Dentaku, of which the original 1981 recording is the B-side of Pocket Calculator. On this album and also on the mix, Dentaku gets appended to Pocket Calculator as effectively a part 2 of the same track. This, for its sins, calls itself Technopop. I still don't think it should be called that. I think it should be called Electric Cafe. Again, changes the running order slightly, takes the silver and white from the original cover of the album, and then adds a little bit of red in there, and again represents the record cover in an abstract kind of fashion. Side 1, Boing Grum Chak, Technopop music non-stop, again recorded at the Tate on the night that I saw them, and then follows up by moving Electric Cafe from the end of side 2 to the start of side 2, and the telephone call, house phone and sex object. The telephone call is an instrumental on this because the original studio version of the telephone call was sung by Karl Bartos, who wasn't a member of Kraftwerk after 1990. The mix, Die Classic Works as the original release had it. The mix is basically re-recordings of classic tracks, represented by the band's first set of digital studios. This presents the album again in its same form, takes a black and white wireframe robot graphic from the 2009 Catalogue edition, takes those core colours and turns it into the core colours for the album. There on CD and vinyl, this is a special surround sound headphone mix, by the way, which is slightly different, sounds a little different in your headphones. And then finally, Tour de France, again reflecting the red, the white and the blue of the French flag and the colours of the album, presenting the album in a slightly different configuration. The original version of Tour de France is moved from the end of the album to the beginning, and some of the other versions of the songs are shortened and appended. Again, this all reaches to about 4.5 hours of new and unexpected music, and I'm overjoyed that it exists, because sometimes after having heard albums thousands and thousands and thousands of times, which is not an exaggeration by the way with Kraftwerk albums for me, it's good to have something that's a slightly different flavour. Not saying necessarily that, you know, I don't like classic Coke, but these are slightly new flavours of the same kind of, you know, the same ingredients. The CD version 3D the catalogue, the most affordable, the most readily findable, most easily available and cheapest version of it, presents 8 CDs plus a booklet. This booklet is not on the is not in the vinyl set. I think there might be a booklet in there actually, but it might just be very, very basic. Again, Tour de France, The Mix, Electric Cafe, Computer World, Man Machine, Trans-Europe Express, Radioactivity, Autobahn. Each of these again in vinyl replica sleeves, so effectively you just get a slightly smaller version of the original vinyl box set, and you get a booklet which gives you some limited information around the albums, the images that go with them, and the track listings that sit alongside there. Alongside this photo here, a copy of this photo exists in the booklet for the vinyl set and has a download code inside it. The download code is now 9 years old and probably doesn't work. And again, this features, you know, the running orders and text and information. So, for example, music and programming and audio mixes by Fritz Hilpert at the Kling Klang studio, the live recording by Serge Graf, the mastering by Henning, the surround 3D mix on the mix is by Tom Apperman, and yeah, you know, there's the 4 performers presented on there on the cover, and I think it says copyright 2017 Ralf Hutter. The 3D catalogue is a glorious, glorious, glorious thing, an unexpected groovy treat to close, to quote Finny Tribe. But this version, the 3D catalogue Blu-ray box set, this is the real deal. It's staggeringly expensive to find these days, if you can even find it. It retailed for somewhere north of £100. Again, I bided my time and chose extremely wisely and found a cheap discounted version at a certain point, but it presents the albums in audio and visual form. I've included in my copy here a copy of Wallpaper magazine. Now you may go, what's the point of this? Well, this was given out free at the Tate Modern Shows. Oops, and hang on a second. This features, well, that was my ticket for the Tate Modern Show. That was a receipt for £60. And here is the wristband that I had for the show, which I included in the box set alongside, and there was an information sheet for each one of the albums that presented here, that gave you biographical detail. On one page it detailed the albums, the years of the original release and the dates of performance on there. This Tuesday 12th of February at 9 PM, and then on the back more information around the band there. So yeah, in recent years, Kraftwerk have returned full circle back into the visual arts context, starting with a performance at the Venice Biennial in 2005. Their first retrospective was held at the Museum of Modern Art, New York, and a further presentation in Dusseldorf in January 2013. So Kraftwerk are clearly setting themselves with an eye on the future for the legacy of them as modern great artists. This relatively small magazine was presented and given away free at the Tate shows. It features some prints from the 3D book, which was available. To give you a flavour, it had some 3D glasses in there, and presumably was a loss leader to try and help sell merchandise, and a copy of the book where people would put these 3D glasses on, and then they'd look at those and go, wow, that's good, I'm going to go and spend £60 on a book. Or if you're like me, you wait considerably longer and you buy it cheaper later on. It features excerpts from lyrics. It features a supplement is a taster of the October 2011 multi-sensory sound and vision issue of Wallpaper, guest edited by Kraftwerk and Golden Lion winner Christian Markley. Of course I wasn't going to leave the venue without one of those, was I? The Blu-ray set then features this here, a exquisite couple of 100-page hardback book, again featuring printouts of the experiences of the show. So for example, that's a photograph of one of the venues. I don't know which one, it might say up there. It probably says down here somewhere, but I can't see what that is. I haven't looked in this book for a few years. Photographs of the band performing live. This one, for example, of the Computer World setup. This actually is taken in the basement of the Tate Modern. This one, again, doesn't say where it is. Let me just quickly check. That's the Lichtberg in Essen. Each one of the venues gets mentioned in here. Shots of the band standing, or more correctly, the robots standing backstage. So this is the robots standing backstage here at the Masonic Temple Theatre in Detroit. And as you go further through the book, and I'm going to quickly have a look through here, Munich, for example. This one again is in the basement of the Tate, to the side of where the performance took place. This one again featuring one of the robots in Turin. This was, I think this is Detroit again. It might be Vienna. That's again another one of the robots, etc., etc. So it gives you a tasteful, thoughtful view of the band and how this is the Evian, by the way, which I think it's in Eindhoven. Yep, and that is a venue I really want to go to. But I'm not quite sure why. And again, that's a shot of the band performing Space Lab at the Evian, featuring that there, a Space Lab, which oddly enough looks like the Evian. This here is probably Red Rocks actually, or LA or somewhere. Again, photos which present the band's story and the tour stops and key bits of graphic imagery. So you really feel like you're getting your money's worth when you read that. Oh, my word, what a lot of money it was when it came out. But that then reflects this is a premium product. It's designed to recreate a Kraftwerk show in your own head and in your own mind and your own heart and in your own house for a long period to come. I have copies of the 3D glasses, these ones here, provided at the Tate for the 3D show. These ones here provided at the Royal Albert Hall in 2017. But the real thing here, that everything is just fancy packaging. This is what it's really all about. These are 4 Blu Ray discs on the catalogue. Open up in a quad pack here with the numbers, effectively presenting the album in concert format and presentation screens format here, both of which with 5.1 mixes of the tracks featuring new recordings, and a small explanatory booklet here, effectively an expanded version of the one that's in the CD box set, that presents to you what's available. Luckily, if you don't have about £300 free and you don't fancy a box the size of a tyre, all of the video material is available in relatively low quality on YouTube, and you can download it for free and watch it for even freer if that's what you choose to do. With that was effectively Kraftwerk turning themselves into a touring museum to their own greatness and their own artistic integrity. It was an astute move, a clever move. It was a way to create hype and perhaps to be able to compensate for the cost and the investment which took place with possibly buying out Florian's part of the band's interests, and then looking at it and taking effectively mortgaging the band's future by saying, right, if I own the band and I can control the band and I can tour the band. Florian, who was never a fan of touring, then could not stop the band from touring and had effectively a payoff to do so. So it was a kind of like a buyout, so to speak, in much the same way that, let's say, Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, who worked together to make movies, when one of them died, it then just became Don Simpson making movies. Or it could have been Jerry Bruckheimer. I don't know. I don't pay a huge amount of attention to those films. I just know that pretty much every film that I liked when I was 13 years old, between 1986 and 1990, was produced by those guys. Probably had Tom Cruise in it. And if it didn't, it had fast planes. And if it didn't have fast planes, it probably had fast cars, Eddie Murphy, and swearing. None of which, of course, you will see in a Kraftwerk gig, apart from right at the end of Autobahn. The band turned into a touring museum, and every year they'll play 20, 30 shows, picking continents that they haven't been to for a while, coming back every 7 or 8 years to making a hefty chunk of change, whilst the band play maybe 30 shows a year and get paid a lot of money to do so. Kraftwerk, although they had been for a long period of time, turned officially into a nostalgia industry. And in August 2017, to promote the release of Kraftwerk, came this German magazine, Music Express. Now, I wouldn't buy Music Express from Germany on its own unless it had a exclusive, previously unreleased and unavailable anywhere else, single-sided Kraftwerk single, a 7-inch version of the German edition of the Robots, presented on a 7-inch there on an etched disc. And if you want to get really sexy about it, the etched disc features the words Kraftwerk up there. I think you can just about see them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 here, and then an image of the 4 snazzy robots on that. So that's the B-side. This is Die Robot Air 333 edition on 3D and presented as vinyl, and it advertises on the back the release of the box set. So this is clearly the single from the box set. I think you can still buy this from Germany, about €9 plus postage, and depending upon where you're importing it, potentially huge importation charges. In April 2019, there was another edition of Music Express, the 100 best German albums of all time. Again, I wouldn't have bought this, and I didn't buy this. It was that it came with a cover-mounted 7-inch single of the remastered single edit of Autobahn, which was on blue vinyl. Ooh, check out the hits on that. And this is the only place that the 7-inch mix of Autobahn has been issued in its remastered form anywhere, apart from possibly streaming. And this presents, Autobahn a 435 edit, which is actually a new 7-inch edit, because the original 7-inch edit was about 333. And again, that was another one. You can order that from Music Express in Germany. And in, here we go, June 2021, to date, the last physical, the last new Kraftwerk release anyway, which was to mark 40 years of the Computer World album, came a special 7-inch cover-mounted single, this time a home computer, in a special edit format on a single-sided 7-inch here, and presented there. Again, this is the only place to get home computer on yellow 7-inch vinyl, is to order it from a magazine in Germany. Recently, Autobahn has been issued for a 50th anniversary picture disc LP, a 5.1 Blu Ray, and a 7-inch picture disc. I haven't seen any point in buying those. I bought the 2020 coloured vinyl versions of the albums. In 2020, Kraftwerk released digitally, and then in 2022 they followed it up physically with the release of what is to date their final record. It is Kraftwerk's Remixes. Again, another example of Kraftwerk being a glorious kind of museum to the future we never had. This features remixes of the vast majority of Kraftwerk tracks that have been remixed from 1991 onwards. Apart from a 7-inch mix of Home Computer, the single edit, which you saw on the cover-mounted 7-inch there, available as a triple vinyl and a double CD. This is not a fully comprehensive version of the remixes. It is missing the original 1983 12-inch versions of Tour de France, the Music Non-Stop 12-inch from 1986, the Telephone Call remix from 1987. It is missing some of the remixes of Radioactivity from 1991, one of the mixes of Expo 2000 from the year 2000. It also features a brand new studio recording by Kraftwerk, a track called Non-Stop, which effectively takes the place of the 12-inch mix of Music Non-Stop. And Non-Stop on this has a curious beginning. Kraftwerk were commissioned in 1993 to produce a series of jingles for MTV, when M stood for music and not morons, and when MTV actually showed music, a series of short 6 or 7 second jingles saying music non-stop in various permutations. Those were excerpts from a 7 or so minute, 8.5 minute re-recorded, rearranged version of Music Non-Stop that was recorded around about 1991, and it's available on this. And it is, by the way, the writing credit for Non-Stop on here is Fritz Hilpert, who's written the music, and not anybody else. So effectively junking that any of the previous recordings of the track with Ralf and Florian and Henning and Fritz there presenting a new version of the track. Effectively, it's a Kraftwerk remix that didn't come out in 1991 and probably should have done. Also, surprisingly, the 1991 re-recorded, rearranged version of Man Machine, which was briefly put on their MySpace, is not on here, but I can live with that because there are recordings of that are doing the rounds. The vinyl edition of this was released on, I think, either lime green or yellow vinyl if you bought it from Kraftwerk.com, where it would cost you a staggering £75 plus importation costs. I waited, this copy was $24.99 in a HMV sale, and it's also on coloured vinyl. It is on black, the colour that goes with absolutely everything. And it's a 3-disc set of Kraftwerk remixes, which means if you buy this, you probably don't have to go and buy most of the 12 inches. You do have to buy the Hot Chip remixes of Aereo Dynamique and La Forme, because on the CD they are full-length versions and on the LP they are edits. So for example, on the CD of remixes, the King of the Mountains mix by Hot Chip of La Forme is a lovely 11.5 minutes. On this it is 6 minutes 33. Although the other mixes are all the same length. And Tour de France Etape 2 closes the CD, whereas it is the first track on the 6th side of the vinyl edition, if you absolutely got to catch them all, like some kind of electronic techno Pikachu. This is the last release from Kraftwerk so far. Unless they release new material, I can't see how else they can repackage anything unless they actually remaster and reissue Organisation, Tone Float, Kraftwerk 1, 2, Ralf and Florian, and finally stick that pesky early single, Kahootek, out. But I don't suspect they'll do that, at least not until they're dead. What we have got here is effectively Kraftwerk being caretakers of their own legacy, looking after their own kind of prestige and creating themselves, or more correctly, self-mythologizing themselves as architects and visionaries who saw the future, if only we were smart enough to see it. With these releases, they further cemented that and became effectively a touring museum to how brilliant they once were. And make no mistake, the live shows are absolutely fantastic. I saw them at Milton Keynes last year. I saw them a couple of times on the 2017 tour. I saw them at the Tate in 2013. They are an incredible live act. It is beautiful to see, it is beautiful to hear, it is wonderfully presented, it is staggeringly expensive. It is a once-in-a-lifetime trip to see effectively the techno Beatles, and I recommend going to see Kraftwerk if you get the opportunity to do it. But if you can't do it, if you can't afford it, if they're not playing near you, fret ye not. These releases are as good as seeing them without having to stand next to somebody that's filming the whole damn show through his tiny little mobile phone. So I strongly recommend picking up Kraftwerk's 3D, the catalogue. It is an essential part of the band's archaeology and their history, and well worth experiencing once you've played all the other albums to death, is to get another vision, another interpretation of what could have been. That brings my Kraftwerk story to an end. Because at the moment the band have not released anything after that. They've just been playing live, touring the world as a museum to their own magnificence, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not as if they're sitting at home counting lots and lots of money and not touring. They are out there playing live on a very frequent basis. The shows are wonderful. I recommend them to you if you get a chance to see them. But if you can't get to the show, this box set is the show, and you can experience something as good as that, and you can get to cut out and keep it forever. The last show I saw, which was at Milton Keynes this summer, last summer, I saw the band play for about an hour and a half. The thing I will say is they're old. You know, Henning is 60-ish, maybe mid-60s. Ralf is fast approaching 80. Falk is probably 55. George Bongertz, who plays keyboards and visuals, is probably in his late 40s, early 50s. And the band will not be touring for that much longer. They are simply mortal, not immortal. And the time will come when we won't have a chance to see them. So enjoy it whilst you can. We're only on this planet once. We only live in this time once. We have to enjoy as much of this time as we can. We don't know where we are without knowing where we've come from, but at the same point, if we only ever look back at where we've come from, we're going to miss everything that's happening right now around us in this moment. And despite all the other things, the world news may be horrific and awful, it really might be, but there is still joy, there is still beauty, there is still cats in this world. There are wonderful things, and we need to seek out the things that give us joy, don't hurt anybody else, and make the most out of them, because none of us know how long we have, not even Kraftwerk. So, music non-stop. This is the end of the line, music full stop. And I will do a Kraftwerk ranking at some point when I run out of other things to talk about. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other. Be excellent to each other, as the Tower of Bill and Ted has it. And I will see you some other time. I don't know where, I don't know when, but I know that we'll meet again. Right, I am going to go downstairs and I'm going to eat a biscuit, and I'm going to watch a crime show about murder, because that's what everybody does in Britain. We're all watching crime and murder and ghost television endlessly. Nothing else, no game shows, just crime, murder and the traitors. So, as Ralf would have it, thank you, auf Wiedersehen, and good night.